they just want someone to talk to, because they'll say to me, I haven't shared this with anyone but my husband. I can't even talk to my husband sometimes about my feelings. And I wanted to create a place for women to share, and for people to just feel comfortable in sharing, because by sharing our experiences, other people feel comfortable and that they can have access to the same things and become parents, because so many people just give up.
That was the voice of today's guest, Sherri Sawyerr. Sherri and her husband, Talashi, found themselves needing fertility treatment. And as their journey took some unexpected turns, they knew they could either shut down and internalize, or they could open up and share. Today, we're going to learn all about their journey, and we're going to find out why they chose to share their experiences with their YouTube channel at Sherri Yvette. I'm Dan Bolger with Progyny, and this is Infertility. Hey everybody, a quick reminder to leave a rating and review on our podcast wherever it is that you listen. That's always extremely appreciated. All right, without further ado, let's get to know Sherri.
My name is Sherri Sawyerr. I am newly married, still kind of a newlywed. My husband and I live in Orlando, Florida. We recently moved here from Atlanta, Georgia, so we are establishing roots here. I'm a solutions engineer at Salesforce, and I also am a content creator. So I create content really documenting our infertility journey and our experience going through that. When we met, we were both, 38. So we, knew that we, once we decided to, be in a committed relationship, we decided that we would not try to prevent getting pregnant, just because, we knew that I was older and, we were both older. But, for the woman, it's always a little bit more difficult once you get past 35. So we were never really preventing it. And we did that really probably about a year before we really started paying attention to hey, this isn't happening for us. I fortunately had a really great OBGYN when I was back in Atlanta, and he always talked to me about even before I met my husband, he always talked to me about my fertility and what are you doing? Either we're going to prevent it, or, we need to try and make it happen, or, if it's not happening, we need to see what's going on. So, after my husband and I have been trying for about a year and talking to him, he was like, okay, it's time, for me to give you a referral to go see a reproductive endocrinologist to see, if that will help. It was the practice that doctor refers to. And I laugh because it was such a horrible experience, because we actually ended up with a doctor that he didn't recommend for us. He had recommended someone else. She just was not available. So we got put with another practitioner that just did not give a great experience at all for us. You're already nervous going into that situation, and it's a very vulnerable state. And if you don't know anything about fertility treatment, you don't know anything about it. And we were not pleased at all.
We talk a lot on this show about choice, and choice in clinic and doctor is a big one. Sometimes there's a specific specialty or focus that you really need that doctor to have for treatment for your specific situation. Other times it's not even about treatment, but personality. The old bedside manner. And that second part is almost as important as the first. If a doctor is dismissive or in some way rubbing you the wrong way, well then how can you possibly commit to treatment? Especially when you consider that treatment can be a long commitment, and a highly expensive one at that.
When we sat down and talked with the doctor, it almost seemed like he didn't have our correct records in front of him. Because, a lot of the testing that they'll have you do as you prepare, even to go to a consultation, is blood work, and a procedure called an HSG. I don't remember exactly what that stands for right now, but it's basically where they put dye into your uterus and it flows through your fallopian tubes to make sure that there's no blockages or any issues. And so I had that done. We both had blood work done, and my husband, Talashi, he had a semen analysis. And so when he pulled up my HSG results, and when I had it done, the tech was telling me, oh, everything is great. Everything looks normal. There's no blockages. Everything is fine. And then when I got my email results, that said the same thing. And so when I got to the consultation and he pulled it up, he was like, oh, I see that you have a blocked tube. And I'm like, do I? Nobody told me that. And then he kind of had to verify and make sure that he had the right results in front of him. So I just kind of felt like he wasn't really prepared for our conversation. He was giving me feedback about this tube he didn't like. I just don't like this tube. I just don't like this tube. And I'm like, well, why don't you like this tube? Like you're already feeling inadequate and you're already feeling vulnerable and like you're not good enough. And that doesn't help at all. And I feel like as a practitioner, that is not your job to reinforce that.
So it's not that the doctor was wrong about the tube. Looking forward, future doctors came with similar ideas. But the way the doctor handled the communication set everything up on the wrong foot.
My husband was definitely not convinced that he wanted to even go through with that. And I just was kind of feeling very overwhelmed and like, I don't feel so great about that right now, and then you look at the cost. And so, at the time my insurance did not cover that and neither did my husband's. So that was a factor as well. And we just kind of decided like, well, maybe we'll just keep trying on our own for a while and table this for later.
They were back at the drawing board and they started seeking out different clinics in the Atlanta area until they found one that they were ready to move forward with. Around this time, Sherri also changed jobs, and that came with some fertility coverage for IVF. Things were looking up, and then they got into their first IVF cycle.
It's funny, like I expected the first time to work, This was a test that I couldn't study for, like I usually am able, thank goodness, to accomplish a lot of the goals that I set out for myself. I was, cautious about my optimism as well, but I just didn't think that it wouldn't work. And so our first round of IVF that we went through, 5 embryos, and then only one made it far enough to biopsy for testing. And then we lost 4 in the process of waiting for them to grow to day 5 or to the blastocyst stage. And then we ended up with 1, and then that one came back abnormal. And it's very expensive, as you know. And I did not have coverage for genetic testing. Even though I had insurance coverage at the time, we still had to pay probably like $7,000 with medications, meeting our deductible and genetic testing, so we still had a good chunk of money to pay, even though we had coverage then.
It goes without saying that when an IVF cycle ultimately doesn't yield any viable embryos, it can be very difficult.
Well, it was devastating for me. I probably, had a little bit of depression after that, just because I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what to do after that. I thought we would have something to transfer. I was torn and feeling like I was kind of like, trapped in this mindset of the clinic, and I needed to find somewhere else to go next. And so, the thing that helped me the most, of course, was like, just taking some space and time away to just decompress from everything. Luckily, we had our wedding coming up, so that was a great distraction to be planning for the wedding. And I did do, some research and talk to a couple of other doctors during that time.
They were shopping around, for sure, but they had a credit available with the fertility clinic and ultimately decided to use that credit for another cycle.
So we did one more cycle with them, and it actually turned out worse. It was worse. This time around, I was on a medication that really suppressed my egg development and growth. And I was prescribed that medication every single day, which compared to now, that medicine is usually prescribed sometimes like when you trigger only, not on a day-to-day basis. And so my eggs didn't even get big enough to be able to get to an egg retrieval the second time around. And by the time they caught it or they, we talked about it or whatever, it was too late at that point. So that cycle got canceled and turned into IUI, which did not work for us.
So that's 2 IVF attempts with 0 embryos. So Sherri was very ready to try another clinic at this point. And as I said, choice is such an important piece to the access to care puzzle. If you only really have one choice of clinic or doctor, you are being severely limited. Of course, I must say that changing doctors and clinics midway is not always very easy, and sometimes it can actually be a bit restrictive. Every new doctor will need to run their own diagnostic testing, which is time-consuming, and can be costly. And the original doctor can actually learn quite a bit from a failed IVF cycle, and then change things accordingly. So sometimes it really is in the best interest for people to stay with a doctor even after a subpar result. Of course, I'm speaking broadly here, and anyone going through this is actually going to go through their own experience, so Sherri is certainly right to follow her gut, and her gut brought them to another clinic.
A lot of the doctors have the same protocols, the same recipe of medications, but if you don't feel right about it, then it's not the right clinic, you know?
The new clinic is actually located in upstate New York.
So we are travel patients, and we do monitoring remotely here in Orlando. And then I travel there for, like an egg retrieval or transfer.
Choosing to travel for IVF might seem like a step too far for some. IVF is already difficult as is, so why would you add the stress of travel to the equation? Well, for those that choose this path, it's either usually because they couldn't find the right clinic nearby, or they found a clinic they adore and it just happens to be far away. For this couple, it was the latter. They loved this clinic, the support they found there, and the clinic's overall philosophy. And so they felt good making this decision.
So I just felt like there was a lot of support with the clinic, a lot of information available. And then during the lives, like you could literally ask any question. So I would always join, on Sundays or whenever they would have them. And I would ask all the questions that I would have. So by the time I got to my consultations, I really didn't have a ton of questions other than just kind of walking him through my story so that we could come up with a good plan. So we did an egg retrieval in February. We got 12 eggs and ended up with 5 embryos. We recently just had a frozen embryo transfer on the 26th of April, and that unfortunately did not work for us. So we are actually just had a follow-up call with him today to talk about next steps.
Sherri and Talashi were still struggling, only now they at least felt comfortable with the support they were getting from their clinic. And that's not the only support they were feeling at that time. Remember, at the beginning, we mentioned that Sherri is a content creator with a YouTube channel called Sherri Yvette. We asked her why she started sharing such a personal experience in such a public way.
Initially, it started as a way for my husband and I to just document our journey, because what actually helped me get from the point of that very first clinic that was so horrible to actually, going to the next couple of consultations was the research that I did. And a lot of the research that I did was on YouTube. I watched other people's stories. I watched, them go through 5 and 6 cycles and then finally get to their baby. I watched some people go through 1 cycle. And I really saw that there was a gap for people sharing their story in the African-American community. They just want someone to talk to, because they'll say to me, I haven't shared this with anyone but my husband. I can't even talk to my husband sometimes about my feelings. And I wanted to create a place for women to share, and for people to just feel comfortable in sharing, because by sharing our experiences, other people feel comfortable and that they can have access to the same things and become parents, because so many people just give up.
And that's actually where they were in their journey at the time of that recording. Now, we do like to publish stories where our guests are still in the thick of it and facing an unsure future. That perspective, after all, reflects the perspective of a bulk of our audience. But considering Sherri and Talashi share their stories so much on YouTube, it didn't really make sense to stop there. We'd just be out of date when it airs. So, sometime later, we set up another call. And boy, have things changed. Not only are they with a different clinic, but now they have different fertility coverage as well. Really good fertility coverage. I bet you can guess the name of the coverage, but we'll let Sherri tell you.
Yeah, a lot has changed. So I'm, super on board with Progyny now for everything fertility related. And we did switch clinics. So we are patients now at Utah Fertility Clinic with Dr. Folk. And it's just been an amazing experience. I mean, my whole Progyny experience has been so wonderful compared to my last insurance carrier with benefits. There were just a lot of hoops to go through even to get approved for fertility, and Progyny doesn't have any of those hoops. So Progyny's been really supportive. I've done a mock transfer and all that, and very supportive. And we switched to Utah Fertility Clinic because we wanted some more diverse options in donor eggs. So we've also used the reimbursement benefit to be able to purchase donor eggs, and then we got reimbursed through Progyny, which is awesome. We did have 1 transfer in September that did not work, but we are newly pregnant from a transfer in February. So I'm about 8 weeks pregnant today, and still early, but just had never even made it to this point. So I'm just very blessed and thankful for all the support that Progyny has given just to make this process just a little bit easier,
It kind of feels like we just stepped out of a time machine, doesn't it? So Sherri was pregnant at the time of this second call, and that's the end of live updates from us. So if you want to keep following Sherri and Talashi, you can go to their YouTube channel at Sherri Yvette. But there's a lot to unpack in that quick update. Yes, she has the Progyny benefit now through her employer, Salesforce, and she's immediately noticed the difference. But she also has changed clinics, and this time it wasn't due to a falling out or a bad vibe. It was for very practical reasons. As they decided to use donor eggs, they found themselves needing a clinic that could offer a more diverse set of donors. This is another powerful example of why having choice in clinics is extremely important. And yeah, donor eggs, that's the other big change. Sherri and Talashi decided to move ahead with donor eggs.
So the donor egg idea was not like a hard thing for me to wrap my mind around, because I knew that I just wanted to be a mom at the end of the day. And at least, we could have my husband's genetics, as long as we picked a donor that I felt like, I connected with, that resembled, some of my features or my family's features. So our child would still feel like a part of our family, 100%. Then I was okay with that. So it was really a matter of just finding the right donor. But yeah, it was still a mental process. I mean, I definitely had an idea all my life of, me having a child that looked exactly like me, but and even if we had used my egg, our kid could still just be my husband's twin. So there's no, guarantee that a kid would look like me. But yeah, it took a little bit of time, but it didn't take me that long.
They loved their new fertility clinic. They loved their new fertility coverage. They found the right donor, and they found success. Now, donor eggs and IVF is a wonderful option, but it can be a bit complicated. And at times, it can feel overwhelming for people. And that's a big reason why the support she received from her fertility coverage that was brought to her by Salesforce, her employer, was so helpful.
I just always felt like things were moving. And I think that's what I like about Progyny so much, is like, Progyny makes it very easy to keep things moving. Like, Progyny is not going to be in the way of progress. And I always felt before, like, the other insurance companies were always in the way. They weren't making things any easier. So I was really, really pleased with just the support that we got along the way. And any changes that had to happen, Progyny was right there to just support it. She would, they would check in with me every now and then, just let me know how things were going. So it was really I just felt like I had like a friend, you know what I mean? It felt more like a guide, like someone that was a little bit more of a casual experience, but that was still very professional. But it just felt more like, it was nice to have a dedicated person walking you through the whole process.
That was a wild journey. 3 different clinics spanning over a 5-year period from when they started trying, and ultimately reaching the goal that they set out to reach.
I mean, we've been trying to have a baby for 5 years. We tried naturally for several years, and then we tried through IVF, for a while. So I definitely think that there's always a point of reflection to look back upon. Like, I look back at my first time getting my box of medications to now, where I'm where it was so intimidating, and now I'm just giving myself progesterone and oil, in my glutes, like it's nothing, where I was so scared of that before,
I want to thank Sherri for taking the time to share her story with us, twice. I also want to thank Salesforce for bringing such a life-changing benefit to their employees. This is not the first time we've featured someone who got their coverage through Salesforce, and I think it's such a great demonstration of what a great place Salesforce must be to work. So I hope everyone from Salesforce feels very proud when they hear these episodes. Today's episode was, of course, about Sherri and Talashi, but I feel in her telling, the episode was also very much about choice. And choice, when it comes to fertility treatment, is largely about access. Access to care, access to a variety of treatment options, and access to different fertility clinics and doctors. When we give people this kind of access, people will reach this kind of result more frequently and a lot quicker. If you want to bring this kind of coverage to your employer, we can help. Just visit us at progyny.com/talk-to-HR. And with that, I want to thank you for listening. If you want to connect with us, you can do so on Instagram at This Is Infertility Podcast. If you want to follow Progyny, you can do that at Progyny Inc. Of course, if you're listening on a podcast app, please leave a rating and review, as that is a huge deal for us. This Is Infertility is brought to you by Progyny. Please remember, this podcast is not intended to substitute for the personalized expert advice of your physician. I'm Dan Bolger, and this is Infertility.